Sometimes I'll walk miles just to find a nice spot.
It doesn't matter where we are, she's always preoccupied with places she can sit.
Things really came to a head when my doctor diagnosed me with SP.
Most days, she's just sitting up at the front ordering nothing and wasting my time. Who even does that?
My name is Cecilia Cross, but my friends and family call me Cece. I grew up in the Atlantic Northwest in a small town. I think it started when I was young. I was always sitting, or at least finding somewhere to sit. As a child, I would always ask my parents to take me and my sister to the amusement park. I couldn't wait to get on every ride. I don't think my condition was apparent until we took a family trip when I was about 7. We went to an Army and Space Museum. Mom and Dad had never seen me so happy, but they were slightly concerned about the fixation I seemed to have had with sitting in random places. I was sitting everywhere. I've always been a gamer. Growing up, most of my friends would be outside, but I'd be inside grinding. I've always been a big fan of the Metroidvania genre, and when the new Castlevania game came out, I knew I just had to try it. I remember asking for Curse of Darkness as an early Christmas gift, and my parents brought it home as a surprise. That game, they didn't know the influence it would have on me. I loved it. My parents didn't realize that collecting chairs was an integral part of the game, and I didn't either, but when I found out, it changed my life. I was hooked.
Hi, my name's Christina Cross, and I'm Cecilia's sister. Growing up, Cecilia was always ruining everything with her disease. When we were kids, she would make any excuse to find somewhere weird to sit. It wasn't really a problem until she first played Curse of Darkness. A couple of years ago, she suggested that we go to visit the White House, and she did the unthinkable. During the tour, our guide led us into the Oval Office, and while he was explaining the history of past presidents and things, Cecilia snuck around the desk and actually sat in the president's chair. It took 4 Secret Service men to get her out of that chair. I mean, it was absolutely ridiculous. And ultimately, we were banned from ever entering DC again.
I knew what I did there was wrong, but I couldn't help myself.
They're calling it pustulosis, and it's affecting America's youth. Find out what might be keeping your teenager at the edge of their seat.
My morning routine is usually quite simple. I get up, I sit at the edge of my bed for roughly 25 minutes. Then I make breakfast and I go about my day like anyone else would. I think I'm pretty normal. I go to the gym pretty often. This is about the time that I normally head to the gym, so. Hey Jules, how's it going? I was just about to head in there.
Yeah, that's actually why I called. We can't have you coming down here anymore. We run like a tight facility, and it's like super small. So we really can't afford to have our only exercise bike be used daily by the same person. It just doesn't look good for the business.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, Jules. Well, I guess we'll just go to the park or something. I recall being bullied quite a bit when I was younger. They'd call me Seat Celia. Sometimes you need to improvise. Nowhere to sit? Even the corroded edge of a creek will suffice. Sometimes I'll walk miles just to find a nice spot. It's even better when I find somewhere new I've never discovered. But chasing that high is pretty much all I do anymore.
Can you move, please? Your disease is tearing our family apart. If you keep doing things like this, they're going to throw you in jail.
Good! Maybe they'll put me in the electric chair. Dusk. My friends have all gone home. As silence falls in the park, I silently await my mother's return. I just love that quote. I've heard people say that they do their best thinking in the shower, but me? No. Get me in a nice Victorian red velvet piece, and I can just think the day away.
My name is Maria. I work down at the local diner, and this girl comes in every day working my nerves. Sometimes she'll come in with that look in her eyes, staring at every seat in the building. One time I had a regular come in during rush with his 2 kids. He excused himself to go to the bathroom, and when he came back, she was sitting there with his children. Who even does that?
Actually, she has pustulosis. It's a serious disease, and actually it's why we have you in here today. She's literally addicted to chairs.
I know what that is. Do you think I'm stupid just because I'm a waitress?
People don't understand what it's like. I didn't ask for this disease. I can't help the fact that I just want to sit everywhere. People don't get it, honestly.
Do you know what you want to eat?
I'll just have water.
You know we can throw you out for just ordering water, right?
Before getting into the video, I wanted to explain the difference in structure of the various types of videos the channel will focus on. The longer form videos will be called Content Clerics, and will focus on the history and potential future of games and game series that have faded into obscurity or have been abandoned altogether. The second are Cleric's Blessings. As with this video, the content will be hyper-focused on a single entry in a series, regardless of its future, and is accompanied by a grading system at the end to better gauge the overall experience, and speak to the game's strengths and weaknesses. And lastly, a hereto unreleased video type called Cleric's Divinities, which are shorter, skit-only videos focused on games I personally enjoy and want to bring more attention to. When you hear the name Hector, what do you think? Maybe you think of Hector, the hero of Troy and the greatest warrior in the Trojan army. Or maybe you think of Hector Salamanca, a kingpin from the Breaking Bad universe. And who could forget Hector Lavoe, the Puerto Rican singer and one of the most prolific salsa musicians in history. But you're forgetting the most beautiful Hector to grace media in general. And that's Hector. Yes, much like most people with significant importance, Hector need not have a middle name, or even a last name. His sheer will and ability speaks to his relevance. In Curse of Darkness, Hector is our main campaign's playable character and a Devil Forge Master, following a lead to the whereabouts of the game's main antagonist, Isaac. Fueled by vengeance alone, Hector tracks down Isaac with the sole purpose of making him pay for orchestrating the death of Hector's wife Rosalie, who was killed prior to the events of Curse of Darkness. The game describes the Devil Forge Master as Dracula's closest human lieutenants, used to help sustain his demonic army, create a plethora of high-grade weaponry from raw materials, and have the power to wield black magic. All of these powers are used throughout the main game in various ways, utilizing these skills and various other game mechanics to create the masterpiece that is Curse of Darkness. What puts Castlevania above other competitors in its sphere are the many different mechanics that engage the player, with individual choice being at the forefront at every turn. Certain items, certain familiar abilities, or even certain consumables may be beneficial at various times, and figuring out when and how to engage these mechanics is key. As previously stated, Devil Forge Masters are able to summon the help of long-forgotten innocent devils, which can be used as familiars or partners in combat, as well as being able to interact with certain puzzles and obstacles that inhabit the game's many different environments. Innocent devils have health bars that function as total hit points, as well as mana for said monster. In battle, players are forced to choose whether they'd like to play more passively and preserve monster health, or more aggressively and risk losing their monster early on, making combat more difficult. While monsters will drop hearts used to recover health during battle, the monster will unsummon when HP reaches 0, and can only be revived at save points, full heal stations, Julia's shop, or when enough hearts are gathered after death. Each devil has various evolutionary paths and learns new abilities based on the form they inhabit, changing form when a certain threshold of ID crystals have dropped from enemies. The type of crystal that drops is identified by its color, and the colors differ based on the weapon type that Hector uses to slay the aforementioned monster. Konami thought ahead and gave players the option to turn off crystal gathering for a chosen ID to avoid collecting unwanted crystal types for your familiar. For instance, you just created a Tau War sword which is much stronger than the Gano axe you were currently using to level your fairy ID. This mechanic allows the player to stall evolution and refocus on the wanted crystal later when a better weapon is crafted. In battle, the innocent devils have multiple stances used for various types of combat. IDs can be set to auto, which allows the monster to use its abilities at will, command, allowing players to choose between the monster's learned abilities during combat on the fly, or guard, used to change how the monster's AI works and forces them to play more passively. Like crystals, the IDs learn abilities mostly through monster kills, and every specific monster in the evolutionary path learns its own abilities, allowing connected branches to end up being the same devil with different abilities, further adding to player choice. Each innocent devil has its own strengths and weaknesses, and there can be an argument made to use almost any variation or combination. Keyword almost. But players aren't forced to only use one type of each devil, as while leveling a monster and slaying enemies, there is a chance for an egg to drop, giving players the ability to start over with the original incarnation of said ID. While progressing through Curse of Darkness, players will meet Julia, an NPC with the ability to forge these newly acquired eggs and switch out old monsters that you no longer need. Additionally, players can sell unwanted materials or eggs for money and buy a small collection of items from this vendor. The newly forged devils inherit a small stat bonus and allow the discovery of additional evolutionary paths. These different pathways don't only affect combat either, as there are many special areas that are only accessible with specific ID abilities, only obtainable with specific evolutions. While not easily identifiable, players may end up walking through a previously discovered area only to find their new ID has revealed an additional pathway or hidden item. These hidden areas and evolutions wouldn't be possible without the forging mechanic of Curse of Darkness, another fantastic addition to the gameplay loop. In classic Castlevania fashion, equipment is key, and the crafting system works wonderfully in tandem with this general idea, forcing players to either make a decision between using these materials, some of which are fairly rare, or hanging on to them for a potential large payoff down the road. Acquiring these more difficult to obtain materials is key to unlocking a majority of the more sought after crafting options. However, there are alternative ways of acquiring them, mainly through the game's steal system. Every enemy, except a select few encounters, has an item to steal from. This system is used in a variety of ways, as every single enemy has different methods used to be stolen from. Some must be uppercutted, or maybe a hard-to-dodge mechanic must be dodged, or even requiring the player to be grabbed, escape, then steal. The player must employ many maneuvers to achieve any and all forged items, and all add difficulty in a way that doesn't feel cheap. As with any Castlevania, combat is at the forefront, and each monster has telegraphed attacks showing damage windows, as well as block-breaking abilities, and even unique mechanics only seen in specific variations of said monster. While traversing the game, certain doors will become locked, and the player must slay all enemies in the area to open the locks. These forced combat sections can be agonizing for the player, but are used sparingly enough that it doesn't destroy the ability to farm materials efficiently. Some small hordes can be dispatched immediately using the higher level ID abilities, making experience farming a breeze. Boss encounters, however, aren't so easy. Identifiable by their menacing, red glowing doors, each main world in Curse of Darkness has a boss to defeat, all with their own mechanics and stealable items. The bosses, especially the Isaac fight halfway through the game, really make combat feel engaging, and test players in a way that most modern games wouldn't. If the player chose to skip most fights and optional materials, they may have more trouble, or worse, may be stalled entirely. Thankfully, our IDs can be used to aid players through these long drawn-out fights. The fast enemies might be tracked down by our Bird Devil, the slow-moving behemoths might be heavily damaged by the Beast Devil, or even certain abilities may be avoided entirely using the Devil Devil. All are useful in battle, except you. Moving on to the grading section of the video, we're using a scale I made called the Gamer. The scale measures gameplay, how it stacks up to its genre, art direction, how the game connects to its desired theme, music and sound, how the audio accompanies and enhances the experience, environments, map design and atmosphere, through variation in scale and variation in type, and finally, replayability, whether or not the experience warrants a second playthrough, New Game Plus, or has additional content. Beginning with gameplay, Curse of Darkness is a hack-and-slash, semi-open world RPG. The game has teleporters to traverse its vast landscape, and many monsters to hack through while doing so. The monsters and their subsequent drops give players a feeling of accomplishment and progress, as the game features a leveling system for players and familiars, and the aforementioned crafting system always changing and improving player performance. Crafting in general uses a lineage system, creating subsequent items from the previous item and a newly obtained material using various item trees. The combined menu streamlines crafting, allowing players to quickly cycle through item tiers in order to make all required items in said tree. Each tree may additionally require items of a different type. For instance, a spear that requires lower tier swords, or a mace requiring a specific helmet. Higher tier materials are scarcely and specifically placed throughout environments to benefit players based on the choice of keeping or using newly found materials right away. While hoarding materials might make the secret items later easier to achieve, they may hinder current progress, as the game has pretty clear building pathways. Crafting at first glance may feel overwhelming, but the game does a good job of slowly rolling out options, so as to not confuse new players. Additionally, there are plenty of guides available to better equip players with a knowledge of the item lineage pathways, allowing for an easier time for the more casual player. As mentioned before, a huge part of Curse of Darkness is the ID system, and gameplay can't function without it. Through combat and various puzzles, the IDs have their own specific uses, and bring players back to previously unobtainable items and unexplored areas to try new ID abilities out. This backtracking doesn't feel like a chore with the teleporters, and even the memorial ticket system, used to teleport to a registered save location, creating a player-chosen teleport destination. This aids in player farming, or can even be used as a checkpoint, tethering players to a location and allowing the use of the magical ticket in combination to return to Julia, then back. Difficulty is a topic that many series struggle with, finding a balance between making the player too powerful or potentially making the game too difficult for the casual gamer. Though Curse of Darkness gives both casuals and pro gamers options in how they can enjoy the gameplay. For casual players, hyper-focusing on farming and item acquisition in combination with the hoarding of recovery items, and even the extra life afforded by a consumable accessory sold by Julia, come together to make the game very accessible for the average player. But Konami thought of their most devoted fans too, adding an optional endgame boss, a boss rush, a hidden tower, an alternate playthrough, and even a hidden chaos difficulty mode. More on all of those later. Lastly, it'd be wrong to not focus on combat in general. Curse of Darkness does an excellent job of not making fighting large amounts of enemies boring through various monster mechanics, intense boss battles, and yet again vast amounts of player choice. Killing swaths of monsters with explosive abilities or cutting foes to ribbons with newly crafted weapons never feels stale. Not to mention the weapon combat has variation through the final hit button, which acts as a finisher attack based on the number of hits used in the combo, giving most weapons a regular chain of hits and then an optional finisher for big damage which players can suit to their needs. Furthermore, there are certain unique weapons that have finishers only available to them, adding more variety and making items feel special. In scoring the gameplay of Curse of Darkness, I'd personally give it a 9.5 out of 10. Having played a large amount of this genre, I can attest to the versatility and entertainment this entry will bring players. Moving on to art direction, Castlevania has always had a strong Gothic inspiration. This is all easily visible in Curse of Darkness. Hector, Isaac, and even this title's Belmont character, Trevor, all don garbs that fit perfectly into the desired setting and time frame. Julia has a long purple dress reminiscent of classic Renaissance attire, and her shop feels genuine in its structure and design. The large aqueducts and dark cold hallways of the game's cathedral further this immersion, by making Hector feel small in his environment while simultaneously staying true to the desired theme. The mysterious feeling of Zed or the out-of-place clothing of Saint Germain also break immersion in a good way, making the magic and obscurity of Valencia feel real. The materials collected seem to coincide well with the time frame of the late 1400s, and are used to create many items that seem fitting. But not everything feels like it fits the universe. Most food items in the game feel out of place, but in my opinion, this immersive break feels necessary. As with other entries in the series, Curse of Darkness is no stranger to odd choices in consumables and item taglines. Pig archers that drop french fries, a dragon you can steal shortcake from, or even milk from a fleaman. As for the fleaman, where's he keeping that milk? In addition, there are crafting items that would be considered joke items, like the sports kit, the champion gloves, or even the toy Pico Pico hammer. These items have basically no benefit and don't fit the art theme at all, but are useful for unique items further down the line. In scoring the art direction of Curse of Darkness, I give it an 8 out of 10. The immersion breaks and overused repetitive tile sets don't do the art direction justice sometimes and can feel a little too non-serious. Next up is music and sound, a strong force behind the Castlevania series in general. Curse of Darkness doesn't cut corners with its monstrous, no pun intended, official soundtrack. Every single area has a unique music theme that feels perfect for the environment and keeps different locations distinct. Monsters all have telegraphed sounds for attacks and callouts, making players aware of what's happening all around them, even if they aren't seeing it. Weapons sound hefty, and ID abilities all feel thunderous, with Hector yelling when used. Even the battle music fits combat very well, with the tone keeping players engaged in combat. In scoring the music and sound of Curse of Darkness, I give it a perfect 10 out of 10. The music never feels out of place, and I still listen to the soundtrack often. Environments in Curse of Darkness are vast and very fitting for the series. the Baljet Mountains are a suitable setting for the first non-introductory area, opening up what felt like the small corridors of the abandoned castle to what seemed like a nice mountainside with various pathways and enemies. The empty, desolate town of Cordova, filled with zombies, is unsettling and creepy in the best ways. Not to mention the infinite corridor, with its impossible construction and odd glowing cubes surrounding players in every direction. Each area in Curse of Darkness is unique and filled with various levels of verticality and puzzle variety, utilizing the strengths of each ID's overworld ability in interesting ways. Freezing time, sliding under barriers, opening heavy doors, destroying hidden passages, or even traversing impassable gaps all fit together beautifully within these areas. In scoring the environments of Curse of Darkness, I give it an 8.5 out of 10. On the surface, the game's environments are great, but are plagued by odd verticality at times, and even the dreaded invisible walls connected to barriers you could realistically jump over. Then lastly, we move on to replayability, something that many games struggle with most. Thankfully, Curse of Darkness doesn't struggle with this at all. As mentioned before, there are plenty of endgame systems players can sink their teeth into, bringing an immense level of replayability to the game. In classic Castlevania fashion, there is a boss rush mode, pitting players against a non-stop onslaught of the hardest fights the game had offered previously, on top of the optional boss Legion, in one long drawn-out fight, testing players' knowledge of the boss mechanics and proper use of ID abilities. Additionally, there is a Colosseum-style set of towers that include enemies from across all of the areas of Curse of Darkness, with the latter of the two towers including tower-specific monsters at outrageously high levels. And with healing items being scarce, this challenges even the most well-equipped players with a long, arduous set of fights. These challenges are all offered in the base game, but aren't the only endgame systems Curse of Darkness has to offer. Entering @Trevor into the file name screen after completion of the game gives players the ability to play as Trevor Belmont, with all of the usual Belmont abilities players have come to expect from the Castlevania series, in a mode akin to New Game Plus. And finally, we have @Crazy, which when entered into the file name screen, gives players access to Crazy Mode, a difficulty option that tests players in ways the base game couldn't, with even the smallest enemy becoming as difficult as the game's bosses and hitting just as hard. Completion of this mode rewards players with an accessory that basically breaks your ID's power level, so have fun with that. And let's not forget the secret collectibles and the topic of the skit at the top of the video, chairs. Curse of Darkness takes the oddly specific and frankly out-of-place gameplay of the sitting mechanic from Symphony of the Night and jokingly pokes fun at it, with every seat sat in during gameplay being available later to see in the game's chair room. A whimsical location filled with a plethora of chairs from across the game placed around a soft, lush field. In scoring replayability of Curse of Darkness, I give it yet another perfect 10 out of 10. There's just too many things players can get into and enjoy in this game for its price, and even players that have done everything can come back a couple years later and be reinvested in the game's many systems. This brings the total score to 46 out of 50, or 92%, an excellent score for a phenomenal game. The last point I'd like to make is that Curse of Darkness doesn't forget where it came from, with items, enemies, music themes, and even Hector himself all being mirrors of certain aspects of the series' most popular entry, Symphony of the Night. I believe it's admirable to know that your entry is on the backs of something that was truly great, but can stand on its own two legs with further expansion of mechanics present in previous titles. After Castlevania 64, who knew the fate of 3D Castlevania games? But Curse of Darkness proved that the IP can be used in this way superbly, breathing life into this now stiffening franchise. In closing, I'd like to say thank you for watching, and please try out this game if you haven't already. If you're a fan of the series or of the genre, this game really does both justice. Wait. No. Please!